Detective Harvey Schlossberg, who worked on the David Berkovich, son of Sam serial killer case in the 1970s in New York, was also a psychologist who developed modern hostage negotiation principles. A hostage taker can be an individual ranging from a domestic violence or workplace or school violence situation, stalkers, or someone threatening suicide, to a group of individuals such as bank robbers, organized crime syndicates, or terrorists taking innocent people hostage. Hostage negotiators have nerves of steel and are often depicted as tough guy cops, resembling Russell Crowe in the movie Proof of Life. My guest today is former colleague, psychologist Dr. Ernst Strydom, now a retired former colonel in the South African police, who became our very first hostage negotiator. Hello, Ernst.
Good afternoon. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you very much. Ernst, when you and I joined the South African police, there were no profilers and no hostage negotiators, although these specialities were already well established within the FBI. So you trailblazed hostage negotiations in South Africa. How did this come about?
Yes, Mickey. In the years we started in 1990, we didn't have access to other police agencies. So what really happened is our commander in those days called us in and said look at this on my table. It is a lot of BBB. Take it from my table and make something of it. And that was actually a request from the Special Task Force to establish a hostage negotiation team. So in those years, it was myself, Johan Pieterse, Kobus van Jaarsveld, and Louis Langenhoven, and we started off the hostage negotiation course in South Africa in 1990. Now, we started off from research which was available in the books. So you mentioned Harry Schlossberg, so we looked at his works, which was available, as well as Frank Bolt's. So we didn't have training before we trained the first group in South Africa. So from Johan Pieter's side, we did suicide intervention. Kobus had a lot of industrial stuff in a group functioning and all of those. And Louis focused on the pathologies, and I focused on the negotiations. So yes, that is how hostage negotiating started off in South Africa. We also attended a course in general negotiation presented by Professor Manus Poelstra, but that just gave us a kick-off.
So you also started from scratch.
Yes, we really started from scratch, and it might be evident later when we discuss some of the other matters. So we actually focused on aircraft hijacking right in the beginning because that was the need from the Special Task Force. But as you know, in South Africa, we only had 3 aircraft hijackings in 300 years. So we also trained the negotiators to respond to bank robberies, domestic violence, suicide, and later kidnapping. Years later, following Marikana, I was also involved in crowd conflict management course in developing such a course, but that is not really a hostage negotiation. In 1995, I attended the London Metropolitan Police hostage negotiation training program, and in 1996, the FBI training program. So yes, that was very interesting. We did cross-training with the FBI and with the RAID, France, and with some of the police colleagues in Lithuania. In other words, they're attending our courses. And their valuable feedback helped us in designing a course that is suitable and practical for South Africa. In SARCO, we developed a SARCO negotiation course or negotiation program, and countries like Botswana, Namibia, Tanzania, and Swaziland, they requested South Africa to present a course in which we did.
Now, Aaron, speaking of Russell Crowe and the task force, how close did you work with the tactical forces and what were your different roles?
Yeah, the tactical force or a tactical team is always a part of your power base if you're dealing with a hostage incident. And the reason why I mentioned this in a kidnapping, it is not because you do not know where the people are actually kept. So that makes it different. But anyway, our relationship with the Special Task Force, as I mentioned, started right from the beginning. And it is not as if we downplay each other. We're never in competition, rather like a dovetailing. And we do not have, in South Africa, we do not have a moment like they have in the movies. Oh, no, we hand over. We don't have those moments. The tactical actions are based on the threat posed by the perpetrator, as well as the probability that the hostage may be injured or killed. So we work in parallel, and if the tactical option is the most obvious thing or the most safe matter to do or execute, then that is executed. Otherwise, the negotiations continue until sunrise and sunset, whenever it ends. Remember, a tactical action is not necessarily killing the perpetrator, it's just to control the perpetrator. So if a tactical action will result in killing the person, that is unfortunate, but otherwise it is to get optimal control of the perpetrator.
Now, Ernst, this year, the focus of the United Nations World Day Against Trafficking in Persons is to raise awareness of the situation of the victims of human trafficking and for the promotion and the protection of their rights. So instead of talking too much about the skills in dealing with a hostage taker, let's focus on the victims. So last week, I interviewed Ernst Strydom, who you remember survived being kidnapped by terrorists in 2000.
Correct.
Now, Ernst said one functions at a basic instinctive survival level when you are taken hostage. And that's the first tier of Maslow's hierarchy of basic needs, as you know.
Very correct. I think surviving a hostage ordeal, it brings you back to your basic instinctive survival actions, and that is very true. So yes, that is how you survive. Going back to your basics, keeping in mind that in hostage, when you're taken hostage, lots of control are taken from you. So you're under control of someone else, and your survival is actually only then for how you survive and how you played your own mind game.
What then happens when you debrief a retrieved hostage victim?
When we retrieve a hostage victim, I think the first matter is to look at the physical needs, as you explained earlier. So if the person needs some coffee, tea, water, anything like that, it is sometimes helpful to cover them, let them feel warm, or in general, let them feel being taken care of. In other words, you look at what are their needs and taking care of them. You obviously try to render some emotional support. And I think the first part is to actually communicate acceptance. And then we also look at some of the cognitive patterns, not necessarily addressing him there and then, but be careful for what cognitive patterns are still with the hostage victim, which might include some form of paranoia, distrust, blame, or some guilt. But what is important is that we usually start off with the person just ask them, okay, tell us your story, so that we can try to understand that. And while we're doing this while they're telling their story, we usually do it uninterrupted and without any judgment. So if we just have a record from their side of view, what really happened to them, and from then we can work on other parts of it.
And I think people tend to forget that the families of the victims also need guidance. I mean, when their loved ones are being held hostage, I'm sure they try to interfere or intervene, or they need a lot of counseling as well, don't they?
Very true. So in international kidnappings, which I was involved, most of my part of in the specific kidnappings was support to the families. Police institutions like the London Metropolitan Police, the UK, as well as America, I know that they do have elaborate programs on victim support or support of the victims of hostage taking. So the support is usually focused on procedural advice, as well as emotional support, helping them through a difficult time and what's on their decisions and whatever to be taken.
Monique spoke to us about her will to survive. So what survival skill tips would you offer anyone if they ever become a hostage?
I think some of the basic matters would be not to threat the aggressor, the perpetrator, and be a person to that aggressor. In other words, leave an impact. If I'm a person, maybe your father, your uncle, or your mother, or something like that, and rely on your inner strength during that period. So yes, that is the basic survival skills. I think if you read on some of the survival skills on the web, some of those survival skills are designed because of what happened in history. And what we have to keep in mind is everyone have his own story. So it's in unique situations. But the best is just to avoid opposing the aggressor and to rely on your inner strength and be a person to that aggressor.
Dr. Ernst Strydom, it was a privilege for me to have shared offices with you so many years ago. And you've left a legacy by designing the courses and the training. And you've trained so many hostage negotiators. So you're now retired from the police, but how are you keeping yourself busy? You're still in consultancy.
Yes, I'm doing some consultation where needed. So when people need some consultation, I'm willing to do so. And it is about the hostage negotiation, the negotiation itself, as well as the procedures and documentation of the policies and the standard operating procedures and exercises. So yes, that definitely keep me busy.
I suppose this would be, in the corporate world, if a CEO gets taken hostage or something.
Yes, I think what people often forget is whether it's a CEO or any other person of the company, it's a value. Human life is valuable in all levels of the company. So yes, it is very important.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Ernst. Thank you for your interview.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. And for the full interview, please subscribe to my Patreon and Substack premium channels. And please leave your comments, share, and subscribe to this channel for more interviews with the real heroes and the heroines behind the scenes. Please support the United Nations Trust Fund for Human Trafficking. And please check #EndHumanTrafficking.